My name is Kevin Dark. This is my 1/6 scale Lego X-Wing, which I built with no metal supports, no wood, no glue, no bent pieces, no broken pieces, just 100% pure Lego.
That's incredible. I've seen a lot of Star Wars creations, but building at this scale is kind of insane. So talk about kind of your process and the inspiration behind tackling a project this big.
So the process for this was actually a bit interesting because my background is a lot of Technic builds, a lot of big Technic builds. So I thought this would kind of be right in my wheelhouse. So when I was picturing how I was going to build it, how I was going to start, it was all Technic. And something this big, you can't really just get right into, especially because I don't use a lot of digital designers. I like to really work with my hands. So this started with a few months of test builds and trying out different combinations, trying out different, the wings I had to build 3 times before I ended up with this final design. And when I started building everything in Technic, I discovered that Technic it's really good for covering a lot of space and for covering a lot of space easy and cheap, but it's really bad at actually holding weight. And this thing weighs a ton. And it's also really bad at torsion, twisting actions, which the wings had to be able to hold the lasers at an angle. So I actually had to throw out most of what I was planning to do and kind of relearn from scratch how to build using the advantages and disadvantages of system. So this was a real learning experience from me. Especially, something with so much weight and with so many weird hanging pieces that also weigh a lot. It just took a lot of a very careful planning and experimentation, but it's something I'm really proud of, and I'm really happy to see it all come together.
Yeah. And where did you start with then with the building process and kind of the first section that you build out from?
So that's actually a very good question. The scale of the entire thing was entirely determined by the lasers at the end. I looked at the whole thing and I was like, what's going to be the most difficult thing? Where do we need to start? And it was the lasers, because we have 3 different sizes of circle. So I needed to get 3 different sizes of circle that are all pretty close to the same, but also a little bit different, and also they had to be strong. So what I did for the whole thing was I found a set of blueprints for the X-Wing, and then I printed it off on 200 sheets of paper, and then taped them all together so that I could lay things down and get the sizing right. And then I did that. It was a lot of paper, but I did it in multiple scales, and then built multiple different versions of the laser to see, okay, what combination of 3 size circles can I build that's strong enough to actually support itself, but also still looks like the right shape. And this ended up being what I went with, which it's 4 studs wide, and then 5 studs wide, and then 6 studs wide. And that ended up being 1/6. So once I spent 2 months on the lasers, then I started working on the wings, because that was, again, the big structural thing that had to hold so much weight. And then from there, it went on to the forward fuselage, and then was just months and months of, well, what do I feel like building now? Because the list of individual details that had to get done was just, so sometimes I'd be like, I want to work on engines today, or I'm really sick of the engines, I'm going to work on the astromech or the feet or something like that, until it ended up, 19 months later, I just had a list of the stuff I really didn't want to do, and then I had to just sit down and all right, it's finally fine to do the nose or do the little detail on the forward angle of the feet that took forever to figure out.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit more about kind of the nose and kind of the main body section there and how that came together, because you've got some angles and things in there.
Yeah, so the nose is actually different than the rest of the structure. There's basically 2 design philosophies that go into this whole thing. I either needed to make it indestructible or make it as light as possible. So the wings and the lasers, those are indestructible. But the nose, that I needed to be as light as possible. So there's one solid core, like a spine going down the center, and that connects to the front landing gear, and that's what's designed to hold all the weight. And then from there, it's just very light. Most of those panels are only 2, maybe 3 plates thick that just kind of lay on or snap on with a few studs. Most of them are actually pretty simple to get most of it. It was just little details on how they actually connect that ended up taking a lot of time. The one section directly around the cockpit, that one took for absolutely ever, because there's whole bunch of weird angles that go into it, so I had to do a really wonky design on it. That's another one that I built 4 or 5 times before I ended up with the final one that would actually go on. Yep. And actually the plate at the bottom too, the whole lawn section that has the laser in it, that I built once just to get the design, and then a second time to get all the colors right, and then I realized I didn't put the laser in it. So then I had to build it a whole other time just to put the laser in it. So there was a lot of, like, as much as I'd like to take credit for a lot of planning, there was also a lot of, I forgot to plan for this.
We'll take a closer look at the cockpit and back of the build now. So come on inside here, and I can start with maybe the cockpit itself. I know there's a lot of details in there, so what are some of the smaller details?
So the cockpit was actually one of the places I'm not as proud of, because I tried really, really hard to get all the details for this as exact as I could, because I actually had an opportunity building this, because no one's ever built an X-Wing in this scale before, so I had an opportunity to do a lot of details that no one's ever actually built in LEGO. But the cockpit, if you actually look at a cockpit of an X-Wing, it's got so many weird triangles and angles. I was like, there's no way I can replicate that. So that I got the general shape of it, and then just spent a while trying to get really cool looking switches and knobs and things. I started with using like a lot of Lego builders, I got a whole sheet of cool tiles, and I'm always saving for something. So I built it the first time in tiles, and I was like, oh, this looks awful. And I had to take all the tiles off and then rebuild it with some more depth, because again, it's big enough that I can actually build like real switches and real levers and things that actually have some 3D elements to it. And then the whole back section was also a lot of fun. If you actually look really closely, there's a lot of Star Wars little Easter eggs that I hid in here. There's a bunch of R2-D2 bodies. There's a bunch of sections from TIE Fighters and the Millennium Falcon. But in the cockpit, I actually have the printed nose panel for the first Lego X-Wing that Lego ever made in the 90s that I had set aside from the beginning of the project. I was like, I want to jam it in somewhere. And it was like the last day of building, I finally found a place to put it in, so I was happy about that.
Yeah. Now, is this based on a particular model or version of the X-Wing at all?
Yes, so this is actually Red 3, which was determined for 2 factors. 1, it had a lot of color that I like, and 2, there are stripes on the back of the wing, red stripes, that determine what number of the Red Squadron it is. And the design I was using, I could only do 3 before it started to get really wonky. So I was like, all right, well, I guess it's going to be Red 3 now.
So we'll take a closer look at the engines and kind of the back of the X-Wing here. And how did this section come together for you?
Well, the engines are actually another example of how sometimes I didn't always plan right, because I designed the back half of the engines, how it's like a black circle just kind of popped right on top. In my head, I always pictured it kind of being like more towards the middle. So that's how I designed it. I designed a whole one where it was right in the middle. And then I had some question in my head of like how a couple pieces go together, and then I looked at a picture and I was like, oh, that's all wrong. I got to do the whole thing from scratch. So that was actually, those hanging engines were one of the more technical problems I faced, because it's just like the laser. It's so much weight, and it's hanging, and it's just barely on there. And also, like the lasers, it's hanging it's actually torsioning the body in different directions on the top and on the bottom. So I had to design a way to connect it that would actually handle twisting in both directions for both the top and the bottom. That's actually one of the few places that I did use Technic. Underneath that box that it's sitting on, there's a whole Technic structure, and it actually kind of uses the panels that go on the sides to provide overall structural support. But that whole thing is, again, one of the things I'm just kind of expecting to plop off at any moment, because there's so much weight and there's so much torsion on it that every minute that goes by, I'm like, oh, thank God it's still together.
What are the details up top here kind of leading up to the R2 unit?
Those are, so I struggled for some sections because there really wasn't one like really good, clean model that I could look at for fine details to actually see, because a lot of pictures and a lot of 3D renderings that you see online actually are all like slightly different in little ways. And that top section is one of those sections that I really struggled to actually find like real clear images of what it's supposed to look like. and a lot of the images that I did find were slightly varied. So again, I took my all the sheets of paper, and then I just looked at a bunch of pictures, and I tried to get as best as I could in Lego of kind of recapturing the general shape, and then the astromech droid, which I designed myself, and that was honestly, that was one of the things I was waiting until the very end, because I was like, this is going to suck, this is going to be awful. But the whole thing came together in like a day, and it was a blast. I had so much fun building that.
Fantastic. How do the landing gear feet kind of fit into the overall structure? How important is that for kind of keeping this all supported?
Oh, it is the crux of the entire thing. I mean, this entire build, it's over 100 pounds, and it's all, again, just Lego, just supported on 3 spindly little 4x4 legs. Basically, the way I did it, I used the 4x4 round brick that has a square hole in the center, and then I stacked 16x16 plates to give it support in the opposite direction. And then the legs are really just tightly fitted together, so there's absolutely no movement. And somehow it manages to stay together. This is the second time it all got put together. The first time was at my house, and I gently laid one of the front panels on, and then the front landing gear just snapped. So, and that was about a month ago, and then I had to go in and find some way to kind of jam some more pieces in it. Because really the trick is, like, Lego is really strong, but there's little gaps. And that's what kills you, because those little gaps, then you start to get movement, and then the movement starts to get worse. So it's just trying to get everything as tight and as perfect as a fit as possible.
Yeah. So you mentioned you're not a stranger to some larger Lego builds you've done over the years, but what was the logistical process like of kind of getting this to the show and getting it set up here?
It was something that had to be considered from the very start. Every single step of this, I had to think about, okay, how am I going to take this apart? How am I going to fit it into a Honda Civic? How am I going to drive it to Chicago? How am I going to put it all together? I actually ended up making for myself a 12-page instruction booklet that's just with pictures on just how to reassemble it all. The wings actually, they come apart and then slide in together, and actually like a really cool mechanism, and then kind of bolt together. And then the front spine just kind of slides on from there. There are a few parts that are an absolute nightmare to assemble, like the bottom section of the front engine actually comes apart in like 8 pieces, and I gotta put it all together while like laying on my back on the table. I got a lot of comments while building this, but other like most of the front section just kind of lays right on, and it's an absolute breeze, and like fits easy in a box. Even the wings, they weigh a ton, but there's a convenient little handhold that I accidentally designed into the landing gear, so I can just kind of carry it by that. It's not nearly as bad as you'd think it would be.
Yeah, that's impressive. So having done the project at this scale, do you anticipate doing another scale build like this, and maybe Star Wars or something else in the future?
I don't know. There's part of me that's like, maybe I'll do some micro builds or something, because this was a lot. I do have a couple other ideas of like big things. I was thinking maybe like a 1-to-1 scale speeder bike, or like an AT-AT so big that like kids could go under it. The natural progression from here is a TIE fighter, but the problem with that, when you build it at this scale, it's going to like 2 big dominoes, and if someone like pushes on it, and where it's going to like collapse on a kid. So I don't know. I have a lot of ideas I'm thinking about, but this took a lot of energy, and there's something really nice about not having to keep building it, because it took 20 months, which is the longest I've ever spent on a project. So there's something that when I was finished, and this is actually something I can tell that other people can't tell, but when you look at it, you can see at what stage in the build I was at, because the stuff I started with, I spent months getting every little detail, and by the end, I was like, general shape is fine. General shape is fine. Like the lasers, you can tell those were the first things I worked on, because they're gorgeous and they have all these little details. And then the front nose, which was the thing I was most dreading, I was like, general shape. It's just got to be the general shape. Nobody else is going to notice the gaps. So yeah, I mean, this was an absolute blast to build, but boy, was it a lot of work.
Do you know the total piece count in the end?
You've asked me that other times, and everyone always asks me that, and I always say, I don't know, or I just throw a random number out. Because it's like building a house. I don't know how many nails it took, but this time I was prepared. My dutiful wife went through all the sections and guesstimated all the pieces. It's about 91,000 pieces.
Okay, yeah. Well, this is incredibly impressive. I've been really anticipating and looking forward to seeing this finish, so I'm so glad you could bring this out to Brickworld. If other people want to see this in person, do you have plans to bring this anywhere else?
Yes, it's also going to go to Virginia, and then I have no idea what I'm doing with it. Because I don't know if I can bear to take this apart, but also, what am I going to do with it? So, yeah, I don't know. If anyone has suggestions, I am open to hearing suggestions.
Yeah. Sounds good. Well, keep up the great work. As always, it's always great to see your builds on display. Thank you.
I do also have one more tidbit, which is something I was debating whether or not I was going to tell people. Do you want to hear what inspired this build?
Absolutely.
This build started as a spite build. So a couple years ago, I built a TIE Fighter factory. It had all these moving sections and assembly line. It was lit up. It had all these rooms. It was I thought the best thing I'd ever built. I was extremely proud of it. I took it to a show, and it wasn't nominated in the Star Wars category, which I was fine with because there was a lot of good builds. But it got back to me, it was just not nominated because it wasn't displayed in the Star Wars section. Oh. And then I was like, fine, I'm going to build a Star Wars thing that's so big it can't go in the Star Wars section. Pretty quickly after that, it became more of just kind of an exercise of like I had set a challenge for myself and I wanted to see that through. But it started with like, what's the biggest Lego thing I could build?
I love that. You know, inspiration comes from so many different areas.
That's true, and sometimes it's wanting to show someone, yeah.
That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for all your work here once again.
Absolutely, and thank you.